The last broadcast, Hush Hash. Episode 1, Dead Air. The bunker was a relic of the old world, a labyrinth of steel and concrete buried deep beneath the ruins of a city that no longer had a name. Its walls were lined with lead and copper mesh, designed to block the lethal radio waves that now roamed the atmosphere like invisible predators. The air outside was toxic, humming with static that could boil a brain in seconds. Inside, the air was stale but safe, recycled endlessly through filters that wheezed like dying lungs. At the heart of the bunker was the studio, a cramped room, bathed in the dim glow of flickering monitors and the soft hum of analog equipment. Vinyl records, cassette tapes, and a few salvaged CDs were stacked in precarious towers around the room. The remnants of a bygone era when music was a shared experience, not a death sentence. The DJ, known only as Reed, sat hunched over the console, his fingers dancing over dials and switches with the precision of a surgeon. His voice, deep and gravelly from years of chain smoking before the world ended, filled the airwaves. "Good evening, survivors," he began, his words carrying a weight that only isolation could forge. "This is Station Zero, your last connection to the world that was. If you're out there, if you can hear me, you're not alone. Tonight, I've got something special for you, a little piece of the past, to remind us what we're fighting for." He dropped the needle on a vinyl record, and the haunting strains of an old jazz tune crackled through the speakers. Reed leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes as the music washed over him. For a moment, the bunker felt less like a tomb and more like a sanctuary. But the moment passed, and the silence that followed was heavier than usual. Reed's eyes flicked to the monitors, where the signal strength danced erratically. Static hissed in his headphones, a sound that had become as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. He frowned, adjusting the frequency, but the interference persisted. "Damn it," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the static. He tapped the microphone. "If anyone's listening, let me know you're out there. I'll be here all night." He always was. Episode 2. The static between us, Reed's days, followed a strict routine. Wake up, check the filters, eat a ration bar that tasted like cardboard, broadcast, sleep, repeat. It was a rhythm that kept him sane, or at least as close to sane as anyone could be, in a world where the air itself was a weapon. The bunker's security measures were his lifeline. The lead-lined walls shielded him from the deadly radio waves, while motion sensors and automated turrets guarded the entrances. The only way in or out was through a reinforced hatch that required a biometric scan and a code that changed every 24 hours. Reed hadn't opened it in years, despite the precautions. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. It started as a faint hum in the back of his mind, a sensation he chalked up to paranoia. But lately, it had grown stronger, more insistent. The static on the monitors seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat, and the music he played sometimes sounded wrong, as if an unseen hand was twisting the notes into something alien. One night, as he was preparing for his broadcast, he noticed something strange. The interference on the signal had formed a pattern series of faint, rhythmic pulses that almost sounded like words. He leaned closer, his breath fogging the screen. "Hello," he said into the microphone, his voice trembling. "Is someone out there?" The static answered him, a low, guttural hum that sent a chill down his spine. He turned the dials frantically, trying to isolate the signal, but it slipped through his fingers like smoke. "Reed," the voice whispered, barely audible over the hiss of static. "We hear you." Reed froze, his hand hovering over the console. It wasn't the voice of a survivor. It wasn't human. Episode 3. Echoes of the Void. The voice haunted Reed long after the broadcast ended. It wasn't here, just the words that unsettled. Hemet was the way they seemed to resonate inside his skull, as if the sound waves were burrowing into his brain. He tried to convince himself it was a glitch, a trick of the equipment, but deep down, he knew better. Over the next few days, the interference grew worse. The static became a constant presence, seeping into every broadcast like a cancer. The music he played sounded distorted, the melodies unraveling into dissonant echoes that made his skin crawl. And then there were the dreams, vivid, nightmarish visions of a vast, swirling void filled with countless eyes, all staring at him. Reed began to notice changes in himself. His voice, once steady and reassuring, had taken on a strange, otherworldly quality. Listeners who managed to tune in reported feeling uneasy, as if the broadcasts were reaching into their minds and dredging up memories they'd long buried. Some claimed to hear whispers in the background, voices that spoke of things no human should know. One night, as he was preparing to go live, Reed caught his reflection in the darkened screen of a monitor. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin pale and gaunt. He barely recognized himself. "Good evening, survivors," he said, his voice cracking. "This is Station 0, and I don't know how much longer I can do this." The static surged, drowning out his words. And then, for the first time, he heard it clearly, the voice of the entity, speaking through the interference. "Keep going," it said. "We are listening." Episode 4. The Hunger of the Waves. The entity's presence began to manifest in the world above. Survivors reported strange phenomenal lights flickering in abandoned buildings, shadows moving where there should be none, and a low, droning hum that seemed to emanate from the very air. Those who tuned into Reed's broadcasts for too long experienced vivid hallucinations, their minds unraveling as the entity fed on their consciousness. Reed knew he was responsible. His broadcasts were a beacon, drawing the entity closer with every word he spoke, every song he played. But he couldn't stop. The survivors needed him, and, in a twisted way, he needed the entity. It was the only thing that truly listened, the only thing that understood his loneliness. As the days turned into weeks, Reed's broadcasts became increasingly erratic. He spoke of the entity as if it were a god, a being that could reshape the world if only they could understand its will. His voice, once a source of comfort, now carried an edge of madness that unsettled even the most desperate listeners. And yet, they kept tuning in. Episode 5. The final transmission. Reed knew the end was near. The entity's influence had grown too strong, its presence seeping into every corner of the bunker. The walls, once impenetrable, now seemed to hum with its energy. The monitors flickered with images of the void, and the static had become a deafening roar. On his final night, Reed sat in the studio, surrounded by the remnants of his old life. He placed a record on the turntabler song he hadn't played in years, one that reminded him of a time before the world fell apart. "This is Station Zero," he said, his voice trembling, signing off. As the music played, the entity's voice joined his, a haunting harmony that echoed through the airwaves. The survivors who listened would later describe it as the most beautiful and terrifying thing they'd ever heard. And then the signal went silent. Above ground, the world was still. The static had vanished, leaving behind an eerie, unnatural quiet. The survivors looked to the skies, wondering if the entity had finally been satisfied or if it was only the beginning. Deep beneath the ruins, the bunker stood empty, its walls humming with the echoes of a voice that would never be heard again. _ To be continued.